Welcome everyone to the first of our series of webinars that we'll be having over the next few weeks. Today is focusing on describing your organization. As Patrick mentioned, my name is Christine. I'm Christine Bevick, the Deputy Program Director for the Cultivating Healthy Environments program here at RTI. RTI is an independent nonprofit. We're focused on improving the human condition. We provide research, development, and technical services to local, state, and federal clients. Our role in the Grantmakers program is led out of our transformative research unit for equity, which we call TRUE. And this division, we're focused on transforming traditional research practices and mindsets to reimagine and create systems that advance equity and social justice. So the Thriving Communities Grantmaking Program is very much at home in this space. We're responsible for supporting the EPA's program in this respect for Region 4. We also are working side by side with the React for EJ, the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center as well. And together we're presenting this current series. So next slide for me. All right. So as mentioned, this is the first of a four-part. So today is describing your organization. This is going to be focused on that first section of the application. So any questions about non-competitive applications or other sections are definitely going to be addressed in the upcoming sessions. So if you've got any questions about the non-competitives, that's actually tomorrow evening at 6:30 Eastern time. So you can drop your questions here, but tomorrow is going to answer a whole lot more of those. And then next week, the webinar series continues on the 15th with developing your project. So if you're trying to figure out, am I applying for a tier 1 or a tier 2 or a tier 3, or where should my project live? That's going to be the best webinar for that one, because that's going to help with going through the questions and helping to differentiate which application, which tier you should submit your application for. And then we're going to close out the month with our webinar number 4 with developing your proposal budget. So once you've identified what your project is going to be, this entire webinar is going to be focused on preparing your budget, reviewing each of the categories that are in there, and the detail that's being requested. All right, so as we're going through this, if you have questions, Patrick just dropped that reminder in there to please use the Q&A button for those. Laura and Janelle are going to be monitoring those, and we're also going to try and answer them as we go through here. But today, our objective for this is really to highlight, to start with highlighting what the program goals are for the Cultivating Healthy Environments and what types of projects we're looking for through these opportunities. So for this first section, you'll be able to have an understanding of what's the structure of part 1 in the application and what is really the intent of the questions that are being asked for that. And then lastly, this is part of just being able to identify what are those critical elements or key elements where you can really begin to set your organization can really shine and be able to be set apart from other applications. So where those opportunities exist. We've got a lot of information to go through today, and we know that there's a lot of questions. So drop those in there. As I mentioned, we'll be answering those as we go. But want to make sure that we've got time also to have some open question and answer at the end. So as a quick refresh, I wanted to just take a moment to review the intent and aims of the Cultivating Healthy Environments EJ Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grantmaking Program. All right, so the program itself, the Thriving Communities EJ TCGM program is one of EPA's largest investments to address climate change and advance environmental justice. The program is designed as a pass-through model whereby EPA passes the funds through the grant makers to distribute and manage the smaller awards to community-based organizations. So the goal here is that it's more efficient than the traditional federal grant process. So instead of taking 9+ months, we're able to condense this process down into a much shorter time frame. So as a whole, the program is really designed to provide federal funds to community-based organizations and other eligible organizations that may not have previously been able to access federal funding. So they're intended for projects that can really help to support the planning, assessment, and development of community-based projects. All right. So next part for this is that projects for this program that are funded under this should help to meet the program goals. And so they should directly benefit and empower communities to address local priorities. So as you're preparing your application, this is really a key point that we want to make sure that you're emphasizing in your submission. So being able to focus on what the project is going to be, what are the activities, and how are you going to know that your project has been successful. But for today's webinar, we're going to focus on how you can start to incorporate that information into this first section. So when you're reviewing and we're reviewing and making decisions about applications, when the reviewers and the community advisory boards are going to be looking at the applications, they're going to be looking at how well your application responds to the project aims. And so those are these 3 points here: addressing longstanding environmental and health challenges within historically underserved and disadvantaged communities, how well your project is working to improve the health, equity, and resilience of underserved communities, and how it's benefiting disadvantaged populations. Now, one of the questions we have over I see is whether or not the members of the community advisory boards have already been selected. And the answer is no, they haven't yet. And so we are actually going to be having an information session later this month or early next month about those community advisory boards and how they're going to be stood up. So if you check that box for your organization on the contact us page, we do have your information about that. And so you're going to be receiving that information as well. So there's more to follow on those. We still haven't set those up yet. And that is due largely to some of the other larger OMB processes that are related to that. So more information to come, and we are excited to be able to be launching those in the near future. All right, so next slide, jumping back to, again, the focus really on empowering applicants and reducing that burden. So the goal being able to fund organizations that haven't traditionally received federal grants. So we really do want to fund as many projects as we can. So in designing the whole program, we really want to incorporate these 3 principles of reducing the barriers to assist communities in developing and submitting successful applications. We wanted to be community-centered, so meaning that community members are involved in making the decisions that affect their communities, whether it's serving as reviewers or serving as members of the community advisory board. Whether or not a project is funded is a decision made by the community advisory board. It's not something that RTI is doing. RTI is making sure that all the pieces are in place for organizations to receive the funding, but whether or not your organization is funded is going to be made by the community advisory board for that decision. So the other piece is the application and the platform. We really wanted to make sure that we were designing this so that it was not going to generate more burden. So you'll see as we go through these is that the most questions are going to be multiple choice. They're going to be short answer. We didn't want you to have to worry about writing a big long narrative that's multiple pages long. We want you to be able to keep those answers nice and short and focus on the important information that you want to share about your projects. So there's detailed descriptions of information in each section of the NOFO as well. So we wanted to make sure that instead of just the NOFO being here's this wordy single space document of lots of information that isn't really helpful in terms of building your application, we designed the Notice of Funding Opportunity as more of an application guide so that you're able to work with it next to you while you're looking at the application online as well. You can save your work and return it anytime. So the platform's designed for you to be able to save and continue editing, be able to go and move around into the different sections based on where you are at that time. The other part is that you can add multiple contributors to your application. So it's not just one person working in the system. You can actually invite other contributors to your application as well. And then also that it's not just into a black hole of what's happening with my application. So you can decide how much information, how many emails you're going to get from the system. So you can get those notifications on the activity, onto if you're able to see the invitation request to collaborate, and also most importantly are the deadline reminders for applications. So you'll be able to receive all of those. Okay, taking a moment. Next slide. So we've got the 4 types of opportunities under this program. Your organization should really choose which program is going to best fit your project. And so this is where we've really wanted to dedicate all of the 3rd webinar there on what is your project. And so if there's technically the system is not going to say you can be working on multiple applications at the same time, but we do want you to prioritize your projects, and determine which tier or which competitive or non-competitive is going to be best fit for your organization. So if you're considering or thinking about applying for a non-competitive, we really want to encourage your organization to focus in on that application first. And please register for tomorrow's webinar so we'll be able to dig into that, into the reasons why. And so, yes, so your question, Adrian, there, if you've registered for today's webinar, are you already registered for the next 3 sessions? And Laura's going to drop the answer in there and write that up there so that you have that. But that's a really good question. All right, so next slide. Let's dig into the meat of this. So if you've got your notice of funding opportunity, so Patrick will go ahead and take a peek at that. Using the NOFO, this is, again, it's intended to serve as a guide for your applications. So it's going to provide those detailed descriptions of the information for each of the sections and the questions in the application. So today we're going to go through the first part of the application. So you're able to, you can review all the questions. The NOFO is going to say, like, here's all the questions that are going to be asked. There's the what you need to know, look for those boxes because that's really key information there. And then also, information that the reviewers the reviewers and the cabs aren't going to see. So that there's some information that we do recognize as being perhaps more sensitive, but also just, is it really going to be something that is going to have an impact on the evaluation of your application? And that's something where, they don't need to know, what the mailing address is of your organization. So that's just one instance there. So next slide. Once you've created your account in SM Apply, that's our application platform system. And so if you haven't had a chance, go to apply.thrivingenvironments.org. Or if you're from the website, you can go up to that upper right corner there where it says apply, the green button up there, or sorry, purple button up there, and click on that. And that's going to take you, be able to link you to the application platform. Once you've created your account, you can do your eligibility check of where your work is going to be done, where does your organization operate, and that's going to take you to the Region 4 program. So once you're in there, you'll want to identify what give your project that name. So here we've just called it sample project because we're not that original at the moment. But you'll be able to see on the left-hand side the 4 parts. So those 4 parts, there's the applicant information, the project information, the budget, and the submission questions. So for whether you're applying for a competitive or non-competitive, you're going to use the same form. And then the difference of where the non-competitive comes into play in part two. So again, I just keep teasing about tomorrow night's webinar on this one. But regardless of if you're applying for a competitive or non-competitive, this first section here of for the organizational information, the applicant information, you're going to be asked to complete all of those questions. So we're going to go through on the next slide and start digging into each of these. All right. Okay. So first question is providing the name of your organization. So this is the name of the applying organization. Which is spell out your organization name. If you've got a great acronym, that's wonderful. We want to be able to see that when you tell us a little bit more about your organization, but we want to make sure that if we are looking up your organization to confirm your eligibility, that we've got the correct spelling, full spelling of your organization. Next, we're looking for the mailing address of your organization. So this is not shared with the reviewers. However, if you're applying for a non-competitive, this is used to be able to check if your organization meets one of the qualifying criteria for a severely capacity constrained organization. Now, if your organization has a PO box, that works too. Essentially what we're looking for here is if we need to physically mail you something, where should it be sent? And so for here, how does an organization with a fiscal sponsor go about the application process? So for that question, it is the name of the applying organization. EPA does not recognize fiscal sponsorship, so whoever is going to be receiving the funding is the name of the applying organization. So that needs to be clearly presented in there. If there's any questions or any issues with that, you can go ahead and drop more of those in there and we can follow up after today's webinar. All right, so that first one's pretty easy. And yes, there will be a copy of today's recording and also a copy of the slides as well. So if you're frantically jotting things down, you will receive a PDF of the slides as well so that you have those also. So one less thing to have to try and jot down there as well. So this next part is we want you to identify the key contacts for your project. So here, this is where you're going to be identifying who's your primary contact. So it is possible that this could be different from the person who's completing the application. So the primary contact, if you have done other projects before, this could be the project director for this, who's going to be the project lead, who's going to be essentially that main point of contact for the project, who's going to receive all the communications and answer any requests about the project that might come into play. So that's something just to keep in mind here for future correspondence. So this is the who's going to be leading your project for this. Next, we want to know about, oh, sorry, go back one more, sorry. Sorry, Patrick. The next point of contact is the financial point of contact. So this is going to really help our grants management team. They serve as the secondary point of contact for the project. And this person should be able to answer any requests about the budget or billing or payments or other financial matters. Depending upon your organization, these might be the same person, but hopefully what we're looking for is that we have two individuals that we're able to have contact with so that if one is unavailable, we're able to have follow-up, especially when it comes to making sure that your organization is getting your funds. So we want to make sure that that person is there. And the third person here, lastly, is the authorized organizational representative. And this is the person, we want to know who has the authority to negotiate and sign a legally binding agreement on behalf of your organization. And so as you're going through, there's going to be a question there that asks whether that authorized individual is your primary point of contact or your financial contact, or if it's someone else. And so if it's someone else, then, and that's okay. It could be your legal department if you have one, or your lawyer there that wants to review things or sign there. If it's different, this is where you can provide that information, and we're looking forward to that. All right, next one. Okay. Oh. So categorizing your organization. We phrase this question as to which best describes your organization. The whole program, in order to be eligible, is focused on nonprofit organizations. So that first category can be really broad. So that's why we want you to choose the category that best fits your organization. So if more than one category applies, you're going to want to select the one that's more specific. So you can use, if you're struggling as you read through those and go, wow, none of these really fit. That's why we also have the other category there. So you can go down to there, check that box for other, and then provides a brief description there about what best describes your organization. And now, as you're going through on any of these questions, if you check a box or something and you're like, oh, I need to just clear this out, I need to reset this. Once you've selected, you'll see that it says like clear below the question. And so you can click on that to just kind of remove the selection for the response that's above. So, all right. Yep. Okay. All right. There's two questions in here in this section that do take some additional time. One of the things that I did not spend a moment on was at the beginning there about how much time it's going to take you to complete the whole section. So the for the for each of these different sections, one of the things that we needed to do as we were designing it was to think about how much time it's going to take to think about the information, to gather the information together, to draft it, to revise it, for other people to review it. So as we're going through these, where you'll see these questions that are a little bit longer, we wanted to highlight how much time, that you might take to complete these. So overall, for this entire section, we estimated somewhere of up to 7 hours. Now, if you know the ins and outs of your organization, it's probably not going to take you 7 hours. But for some of these questions, particularly this question where we're asking for providing up to 500 words about your organization and telling us about what your organization is doing, that's going to take a little bit more time perhaps. So in drafting the response, so as you're going through for this question, so tell us about your organization, we want to make sure that you're addressing each of these points. So whether you're working in the system, or we want to strongly encourage you to work outside of the application platform also to draft your answers. Now, whether it's Google Docs or Word doc, just somewhere where you can draft and be able to share it with others in your organization, just so that you can make sure that you're responding to each of these 4 points, but also that you've got that place to be able to edit and track your changes. So the first points here is whether or not your organization has received grants or other funding from the federal government or other organizations. So it's not, we want to know about federal funding, but we also want to know this is a good place if you've received funding from other entities as well. If you've never received funding, that's also good to highlight here as well. This is one of the programs where if you don't have past performance, that actually can lean more into your favor, because we are looking very much to fund organizations that have never received funding before. And that's where the second point around the challenges that your organization has faced in receiving funding or even pursuing funding. That's the second point, is where we want you to start highlighting that and beginning to speak to that. This ties into actually one of the next questions in this section. So for this one, you want to just kind of touch on it, but you'll have another 250 words to be able to really expand on those challenges. So again, putting the pieces together, sometimes I write like index cards or just different sections, post-its. It's the writing process can sometimes be more intense, or maybe, just drawing it out somewhere else before you put it into the system. So don't feel restricted by the application platform as you're drafting these. Make sure again that you're responding to all 4 points. So the next 2 items are about your organization's experience. So telling us about what your organization does. What's your experience working with environmental or health related issues? We want to know what your organization is doing to address issues around climate change and environmental justice. Now, this is something where you may already have some language on your website. It might be, or in a brochure or something, it's that about section, like about our organization. So this is a place where hopefully your organization, you don't need to start from scratch in terms of writing this. Now, if you're newly formed or organizing or haven't had a moment to be able to reflect on that, then this is a really great place where you can begin to formalize that language. And the 4th point here is to tell us about your organization's experience working directly with your community on projects and issues. So this is really where you can shine a light on the great work that you've been doing already to date, and how this funding and how this support is really going to help you just take that to the next level, to be able to continue that, to be able to expand the work that your organization may already be doing at this point. Number 4 is also where, if you're, it's a good place also to speak to how your project is going to be benefiting your community, and how you're directly working with the community, and how there may be limitations or different ways that this funding can then support that outreach and engagement. So here, again, when we were thinking about it, 500 words is not that much. So we wanted to make sure that we were suggesting a time that would give you that ability to reflect on the information about your organization, to gather those pieces together, and be able to get to that point where you can copy and paste them from wherever you're working and drop it into the application in this space. And I just want to pause there for a moment. Janelle, Laura, are there any questions over in our Q&A?
There are many questions in our Q&A.
I know, I see those there. So
there are some that are just asking more about, there's one you should be able to answer easily about where there are those 3 different roles, about who plays the role in the organization. So people are wondering if it's possible for the same person to do all 3 roles, or to be the point of contact in the fiscal point of contact.
Yes, so it is possible, if you have a very small organization, that it could be the same person. In that space, it would be really helpful for us also to have, again, who's that second person? Because if this is not, this is intended to fund organizations with a body larger than 1. Individuals are not eligible to receive funding, so that's where we want to see that, if your primary point of contact, if you happen to take a vacation, or if you're just simply, life happens, who is that second person that we're able to connect with on that one? I saw another really easy question in here about, once the application started, can we go back and edit? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. So when you are in the application, at the bottom of that page where there's the questions, there's going to be a series of buttons there. One's previous, that allows you to go back to the previous page. And then there is save and continue editing, which is where, if you just want to make sure that you save everything that's on that page in that moment, you can do that, or next. And if you click next, that will save everything on your page and take you to the next page. So say you get to a point and you're like, I want to go back to this one section. You can use the menu over there on the left where it has those four parts to navigate to that section, and then use the next button to get back to the page that you would like to revise. So you could definitely go back and edit those before up until the point that when you press submit. And so you can edit any of those at any point. And if you have some issues with that, we've got the work sessions that can also help with troubleshooting those as well. Um, let's see. The other part on just that navigation piece is, say you want to be able to go through and just move on to the next question. So, if you're sitting on this page right now of, okay, locating your organization's identifier, um, this is one where you're like, I know we have one, but it's going to ask me for what that is, and I don't have it offhand. I don't have it sitting right next to me here at the computer, or if you're working on this on your tablet or anything like that. Um, and you want to be able to come back to it. Then you can go ahead and you can put an X into it, because if you try and hit next, what's going to happen is you're going to see an error message. It's going to say, you can't leave this blank. Well, the way around that is to just put an X or a 0 into the field, and that satisfies the criteria so that you're not leaving it blank. Now, the important part is, if you do that, make sure that you come back to it and do fill in that information. Otherwise, as we're doing our initial administrative check, we're going to send it back and go, hey, this field doesn't have the right information in there. Can you go ahead and update that for us? So for this question, does your organization have a unique entity identifier? So this will be the next question that you have. And again, this is information that's not shared with the reviewers, but we use it as part of the initial administrative review to make sure that your organization is eligible. And this gets the ball started to also be able to make sure that you can receive your funding. So whether you're getting funding from the TCGM through the grant makers, or if you're receiving funding from EPA directly or other federal funding agencies, your organization is going to need that unique entity identifier. One of the key parts here is that if your organization does not have one today, so say that you're newly incorporated or you're not even sure if you have one, keep going with your application. Click the button for no or don't know, and then you can also respond to the next question about whether your organization needs assistance acquiring one. If you have one, if you click yes, then you're gonna see a box that opens and asks for that UEI. And so if your organization previously had a DUNS, or a data universal numbering system number, through sam.gov, if you previously had a DUNS, now you're going to have a UEI, because sam.gov switched over from the DUNS to UEI. And there's a link in the application there if you want to read more about that federal change there. But if you're on the know or don't know, that's perfectly fine. The goal is that we want your organization to have that UEI, so that if you're selected, we'll be able to move forward with the award process there. So our goal here is to get that ball rolling while your organization, while the application is under review. So if you need the UEI, assistance is available. And so there are office hours every other Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. These are hosted by EPN, the Environmental Protection Network. The next session is going to be January 15th. And Laura, I don't know if we can just drop that registration link there, that tiny URL, into the chat. So when we get off this screen, people can still go back to it and find it.
I shared the longer link that has more details about it as well, and you could follow that directly to the registration link.
Awesome. Wonderful. All right. Okay. So there's help available. So if don't let UEI deter you from moving forward with your application. All right. So as you move through, the next one is about reporting on your organization's finances. So this is where we wanted a multiple choice, where you can identify the category that best fits the size of your organization's budget. And so we're asking about last fiscal year. So however your organization defines your fiscal year, whether you start in July or September or January, it's going to be what is your organization's fiscal year? So those 12 months, what was your organization's budget? And you're going to select the range that best aligns. So if you had an operating budget of 250,000, then you're going to select that 100,000 to 499,999. And so this is one where if you are not, if your organization didn't have a budget, so this is maybe your first year, you haven't had a budget, you could select no organizational budget. Or if you can also select prefer not to answer. And that's something where if you are applying for a non-competitive and you select prefer not to answer, then that could potentially impact our determination of criteria to meet to identify your organization as severely capacity constrained. So just you can certainly use that button if you'd like to, but we are also looking for just to get a sense of the size of your organization. And there might be some follow-up questions that our grants management team um, might need to review following the risk review for that. All right. So next, this is the last question of the section, and it's turning challenges into opportunities. So this is the 250 words that I alluded to from the previous tell us about your organization and tell us about any of the challenges that you might have. This is one where you would have introduced it in that first section, and now this is where you can expand on it in those 250 words. So this is where you can highlight how this funding is really going to be able to help your organization move forward, and where you may have faced barriers in the past. And so this could be whether it's federal funding or just funding in general from other sources. So I see the question over there in the Q&A about clarifying the point about not having received funding. So federal funding would be like if you've gotten it from EPA or if you've gotten it from the HUD, from Housing and Urban Development. So any of the federal agencies, any of those the nice acronyms that come through. That's, we want to know about largely about the experience your organization has with funding. So if your organization hasn't ever received funding, then this is a really great place to be able to highlight, our challenges are of why that might be the case, or what that might be in terms of being able to, what might have prevented some of that? Is it, getting registered into sam.gov of where do we even start? Or is it, we've looked at it, but we're really, reporting requirements have always been a barrier for us. What are those pieces? And part of that is really being able to then be able to work with the TICTAC and be able to provide your organization with those resources and support so that starting with this opportunity, you're able to then be successful moving forward. So this isn't so much as a um, what are the challenges that you're going to have because we're um, looking to follow up with you. It's really about how can we empower your organization? How can we help your organization move forward from this opportunity to future opportunities? So we're looking forward to being able to identify these. And again, it's going to may take some time to articulate these. So it's 2 to 3 hours is right within that time frame. And all of these, for any of these questions that have the longer pieces, um, You can use bulleted format. You can provide a list of what are the issues that you've had. We've had X, Y, and Z, and provide the bullets there with brief descriptions. We look forward to those because it makes it easier for the reviewers to read them, but also just to really get to the point there. And again, it's not a writing test. So, um,
Christine, we have a question in the or a point in the chat that's asking if this is where organizations should distinguish themselves for the non-competitive opportunity.
Yeah, so whether it's competitive or non-competitive, that selection is going to happen in the next section of the application. So that's the first question of the project information of what are you applying for. So we're actually going to spend some time tomorrow evening talking about how to use this section if you're applying for a non-competitive. So register for that one. If you can't make it, then it is recorded, but we're going to dig into this question a lot more tomorrow for the non-competitive awards. Um, we'll get into how you can use this to make your organization more competitive for a non-competitive. So, all right, I want to make sure we've got time. So Janelle, do you want to talk a little bit more about how React for EJ and CERC can help applicants as they think about funding and move towards funding?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Christine. I am very excited to share the ways in which the EPA Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers are supporting communities in applying for the Grantmakers program. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about the services for the technical assistance centers that are servicing Region 4 and will provide for communities applying for the TCGM funding. So the React for EJ team, there are two different technical assistance centers, or TIC-TACs as they're known, in Region 4, and communities and organizations are able to access both of these resources for technical assistance. This support is in addition to the existing services that are being provided by our technical assistance centers. TCGM specific support services include weekly office hours, topical webinars, weekly application work sessions, and biweekly SAM.gov registration sessions led by EPN. And Christine mentioned those earlier. Office hours are being held once a week, and that has started starting this week. They are group-based virtual sessions via Zoom where questions are answered in real time. We do ask for pre-registration so that we can learn in advance what your individual needs are prior to the session. And you can register on the events page at www.reactforej.org. And our next office hour is today, actually, at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central Time. We'll also have topical webinars that will be held once or twice per week beginning in January, and these will also be recorded. This is an example of one of them. And they will consist of 4 different topics that coincide with different sections of the application that include describing your organization, which we've been hearing about today, developing a project, creating a budget, and applying for non-competitive awards. These sessions will be recorded, and you can register on the TCGM website at thrivingenvironments.org on the applications page. Additionally, we will be holding weekly application work sessions starting this week, and these virtual sessions will be group-based with breakout rooms that will focus on specific sections of the application. And pre-registration, again, is required for this, and you can register at www.reactforej.org. And these working sessions will be starting tomorrow, and they will be held Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern for Central Time. And also, we wanted to mention the Regional Partner Environmental Protection Network, and they will be holding SAM.gov office hours every 2 weeks on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, 1 to 2 p.m. Central. These virtual sessions will provide help starting, continuing, or completing the SAM.gov process. Again, pre-registration is required, and the next office hours for SAM.gov is January 15th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern, 1 to 2 p.m. Central. And you can register on the EPN website. We are wanting to make sure that we are being as responsive and available to organizations that are trying to apply for funding. If you find it at all difficult to attend these sessions because of timing, technology challenges, or other issues, please let us know via our website or 1-800 number so that we can find a better way to accommodate your needs. We look forward to supporting you and assisting you with getting these applications submitted. And I will turn it back over to Christine to close this out and open it up for questions.
Okay, well, Laura's going to help me sift through some of what's in our Q&A, but just want to say thank you all for being here, and I will repeat that a little bit later. But we hopefully, the slides and the review of the questions today have been helpful in providing an overview of some of those, as well as how the TICTAC is available to help you with your organization, with your application. We want you to be successful, so. If at first you don't succeed, you're going to get feedback also, so that you can reapply and hopefully be able to be successful on the next round. So Laura, we can open the floor here for some additional questions.
Sure. We have a question that's been there for a while, so I want to get to it. I'd like to pull in Tatiana to talk a little bit about the community advisory boards. The question is if these members are residents or stakeholders in disadvantaged communities. And then Christine did talk earlier about how those have not been selected yet.
All right, so welcome Tatiana. She's leading up our engagement and serves as the point of contacts for our community advisory boards. They'll be coming online. So Tatiana, do you want to speak a little bit to help us answer that question?
Yeah, sure. I'll just add a little bit. Thanks for having me to share more about the context of the community advisory boards. So there's going to be 4 per region, and within those 4 boards, there's going to be 8 folks. And to answer the question, yes, the vision is that these folks are people who are from communities that are most directly impacted, so that we can leverage their lived expertise and really enhance our understanding of the applications and the impact that your project will be making. They have not been selected, and we'll be sharing more about that process to promote transparency and who these folks are and what the criteria will be. But that's upcoming shortly. So I hope I answered. I think I just repeated everything, but I just wanted to reiterate that's definitely our vision in line with the mission of the program.
Thank you, Tatiana. There are also a number of questions about where the organization should be located. And one specific one, it's my organization was initiated in the state of Texas. Will I need to transfer my registration to Georgia before applying?
Hi, Alexander. Thank you. That's a really good question. The answer is no. It's more of where your work is going to be taking place, where the community is. And if you can mention that a little bit about tell us about your organization, about how you were founded in Texas and you've now relocated to Georgia, that's a good place just to drop that mention there. And then but as long as your work and is focused within Region 4, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're going to be asking the reviewers and the cabs to look at. If you're in Texas and you're doing some of that work, that's going to be Region 6 grant-making program for that. So if you're still doing work in Texas, that's great too. And if you ever uncertain, I know I saw the question in there about dual state partnerships in there. We also have the National Central Grant-Making Program. So you could apply to that to be able to view that program. I think one of the things is you should be able to see it as if you've selected at least one of the states in Region 4, being able to see National Central as well. So you could submit that application there. And I think, Melissa, that was your question around the dual state partnerships. So if both your states are not in Region 4, then National Central is going to be a good one for you, as long as one of those states is in the National Central region. Yep.
Great, thank you, Christine. Similarly, Ronald had a question about, oh, it disappeared. Just about, oh man.
That one,
Yeah,
let's
I think
see.
Tony was
Okay.
answering it.
Yeah, I think so. I think, Ronald, that's your question about the zip codes. And
Yeah, if the organization is in a different zone from the project location.
mhm. Excuse me one moment.
And I think that has to do with the underserved, the zip codes being used to identify underserved communities. If you could talk
Yeah.
about how that zip code is used.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into that a whole lot more also when we get into the program description part around the CGES tool and how the Inflation Reduction Act identifies disadvantaged communities, because there's the mailing address for your organization, but in that project description piece, there's also a section, short series of questions about where the work is going to take place and the community that's benefiting from that. So those zip codes may not be the same. And you'll be able to actually provide that information in that space there. And that goes into how is your project benefiting underserved or disadvantaged communities. And that's where you can identify those. And that's definitely where the bulleted lists come in handy. If you're listing counties or zip codes or census tracts, that's where that space can go. So yes, your organization can be located in one zip code, but be doing work in another. That's possible. Mhm.
Great, thank you. So we have a concrete question about the application process, and Monica's asking if the only way to apply and create a password is by Facebook or Instagram or
Oh
some other
gosh,
way. They have a
no.
Comcast.net email and want to make sure if they can apply.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. So going to we've got the work sessions. We'll actually have someone there from TCGM to be able to pull up the application site. So to be able to create your account, yes, you could link those to one of those accounts, but you can use any email as long as you've got a valid email address. So if you've got a Comcast.net, if you've got an AOL.com, I don't even know if there are some Junos.com still out there, but if you've got them, then as long as you've got an email address, that's one way to be able to create that account. So it is not restricted to anything that Meta is going to provide for you there. So if you're running into issues with that, please let us know. And you can reach out to us on the contact us page to get more information there.
There's a question here about the aims for funding that was in there. So they're asking, is there a definition for those different check boxes? So in particular, one is healthy homes. Is there something they can reference about what healthy homes means?
That's a really good one also for the project. I'm gonna probably apologize for not being able to answer that right now. It's a really good question. And that's going to fit under which category does your project fit under and how are those defined and identified? And so for those, we'll be digging into that a little bit more under the project piece. But I do want to flag that one. So internally we can look that up and be able to help provide that an answer to that for you. So all of the questions that are coming in here, we've got the 5 minutes, 6 minutes left. We know we're probably not gonna be able to answer all of them, but they do go into our larger set of frequently asked questions, so we can provide answers to these. Patrick, can we go to the next slide just so as we're going through some of these other questions, folks can see when these webinars are coming up. Great. All right,
Great.
look. Yep.
We have a lot of questions. So as you said, I don't think we'll be able to answer them all. There's one, will newly formed organizations with little to no community engagements be competitive?
Yes. So if you have a if you are fitting into that category, you are a really good candidate for the non-competitive opportunity. So please, I hope you're registered for tomorrow's session to be able to see what that is, and be able to dig into more of those places, because those are the questions and the application, and it's shorter, so it's a little bit easier too. There's less questions in part two for your organization, but that's really where what those non-competitive applications and what that opportunity is intended for. It's, first time just building foundational work, and you'd be a great candidate for that one, most likely.
Great. And I know we're pretty much towards the end of time, so if you wanted to do the last final slides, and we could see if we could answer any more at the end.
Yeah. So thanks, Patrick, for putting up that feedback poll there. So just take a second there to help us provide some feedback on how we can make these better. And then if you haven't already, you can take a snapshot with your phone with our QR code to make sure that you're staying connected. This is where you can also check the box for more information about the Community Advisory Board or serving as a reviewer. And again, we're going to have upcoming information sessions for both of those. So those are going to be there. And then Robert, to your question there about if you're selected to serve on a community advisory board, does it eliminate your organization from funding? And the answer is no. So that's why we have multiple community advisory boards, so that we're able to mitigate actively those conflicts of interest. Because if your organization applies, then it'd be a conflict if your CAB reviewed those, and that's why we have 3 others that would be able to review your application as well. So we are looking for really, being able to fill those community advisory boards, and also have our wonderful, being able to have reviewers that reflect their communities across the region as well. Maybe one more question, Laura. Let's try and squeeze one in.
Right. If their project takes place on public lands, so land belonging to the city, will they need documentation of their work to include them in the application?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to defer that one to our project piece, our project webinar that's coming up on the 15th. That is documentation that, yes, if you're going to be, depends on what the project is and what's going to really help your application be stronger as you move forward, because it's great if you want to be doing a project, but if it requires that coordination and collaboration, we'll be able to share ways about how you can present that in your application as well. So. All right, so our last slide here, we encourage you to if you know someone who was unable to register and attend today's session, whatever situation they might have been in, the link and the registration for upcoming sessions are available on the website, and you can always share the recording. We'll have this posted at some point in the future, so it will be available for others. You can also check your email for more updates on the webpage, and please just stay connected. That's the best thing you can do to reach out to us through the website there, as well as with the TikTok and React for EJ or Circ, and work with your contacts there to stay up to date with different pieces, and I'll shamelessly plug social media for any of those additional resources and upcoming news. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Janelle. Thank you, Tatiana, Patrick, Tony, Karen, the entire team that has been able to support today's webinar. And thank you for all attending. It's been a wonderful turnout we've had. I think I saw the attendance there to cap over 80. So have a great afternoon, evening, or morning if you're in Central Time still, I guess, a little bit. So, but have a great Wednesday, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming webinars or work sessions or office hours.